and welcome back to the Villa Fella podcast. I'm here with, as always, with my good friend Dan Wiseman. How you doing, Dan?
I'm not too bad, mate. Not too bad. It's a weird world and quite a sad one at the moment, isn't it? But no, I'm keeping myself busy. It's good to see you again. No guests this week. No, unfortunately, just you and I. But we got. I thought we'd head up the show. We got a decent platform here, mate, and I think it's probably good that we should start just by briefly going over the events of the last week and what's been happening in America and stuff like that, and how it's a terrible thing to see, isn't it? And it's really put a downer on my week personally. I'm sure it's the same with you.
Absolutely, it's it's never something you want to see, but it's a good thing that's happening, I guess. Obviously the tragic murder of George Floyd, and it is a murder. No matter what people say, it's a murder. But it's good to see that there's so much sort of being done about it by the public. I think that the response in terms of the protests, there's a lot of peaceful protests going on, a lot of petitions that can be signed. There's so much good that's finally being done about the injustice that Black people face on the daily. And me and you are really in no position to say how they should feel or how they do feel or whatever. That's not what we're here for. But as you say, we've got a platform. There's going to be links in the description of this podcast to petitions you can sign, so just some information as well, so you can help keep yourself educated with the Black Lives Matter movement. It's something that is very important right now, and I've got to say that I'm proud that it's happening. I've got people out in the States who are going to protests every day before and after work, getting maced by police officers and stuff. They're protesting peacefully. So I just like to say I'm proud of all of my American guys out there who are doing their bit. And I know you'll certainly have people out there doing the same, Dan. So it's good to see that there's there's finally people have woken up and realised that we have to do something about this.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. I think as we record this, the protest in Birmingham is at 4 p.m. today. I think our very own Tyrone Mings is going to be present. I think I saw on his Instagram story that he's hoping to attend, and I actively support that. I think it's really good. You're absolutely right how people have responded to that, and I think the uproar that we've seen in all communities from people of all race and all walks of life, but I think especially young people like ourselves. I think I have to stand up for our generation and say that we are finally starting to see the results that we were hoping for. Those officers are being tried with appropriate measures, second-degree murder, and then the other three were his assailants. I think it's good that we're starting to finally see the results of these things. But yeah, absolutely, mate. As you said, it's not really our place to speak too highly on the most, because as two white kids from Birmingham, I'm sure we'll never really understand the magnitude of it. But no, as we said, I think it's good that we're the Villa. I saw they started with Paul McGrath yesterday, and are going to highlight the Black players that have been so important to our history. And I think there's going to be a series of those to come, and it'd be really good to highlight those players specifically, because I think it was Ian Taylor that we had on the other week, only touched on it briefly, but the racial abuse that he was subjected to throughout his career. And yeah, it's something that, as obviously in the UK, we're just as guilty of in a lot of ways, and we're far from perfect as a country. So no, absolutely, and I think a poignant way to get the ball rolling on this podcast.
Absolutely, and as you kind of touched on with the stuff, that it's good to see Villa coming out in support, and the Paul McGrath video, stuff like that. As there's obviously more to come as we're recording now. We're not quite sure what's come out yet, but obviously I'm sure you guys will see that on the socials. And I'd just like to say as well, I'm proud to be a supporter of a club that is always has been so diverse and accepting of people from all walks of life. And if I ever see racism or hear racism, it's certainly something I will call out, and I have called out on my Twitter feed actually, from a fellow Villa fan. All of our heroes, Dan, they're Black, they're white, they're Asian. Some of our best players are not British, they're not white. As you say, Ian Taylor, Gary Thompson, absolute heroes who we've had on the podcast, are Black men. So as a club, we've always been so diverse and accepting, and I think Birmingham as a city has been as well. So I'm proud to see Villa have put a firm stance out, and as well, not just Villa. Obviously, you've seen other clubs come out, West Brom as well. Absolutely,
shout out to those guys.
One of their fans.
We'll give the Baggies a shout out on this podcast, but it's definitely due this time, isn't it?
Absolutely, it was great to see organisations like this come out and support it, as they should as well, which is is important. As well, not to start the podcast in a complete downer as well, but as our last recording didn't manage to make it out, we would like to talk about the passing of Dean Smith's father, Ron Smith. Obviously, it's horrible news. It's been known for a long time that he suffered with dementia, and it's been well documented. Dean's feelings on that, but it's completely remarkable to see Dean out on the grass straight away afterwards, all smiling, and hearing the players' response about it as well. Dan, because that's not really something we'd heard much of when we touched on it in the podcast. I didn't quite make it out. It's really great to see, and obviously it's an absolute tragedy, and our hearts go out to the Smith family. I mean, it's just a credit to Dean Smith as a man, isn't it? Really, how he's handled this.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. I think it was obviously we don't really know when the photos were taken, but it was the day after his passing, and the Villa tweeted out a gallery, as you were saying, of him on the training ground and all smiles. And I think this is a nice way to sort of time with what we're going to talk about today, is that how rallied the players seeing by it. I've seen a lot of the Villa players come out and say how deeply upset that they were by the news, and that they feel now they have a responsibility to fight for Dean and to give him something to smile about, because I think a big shout out to the Villa family as a whole, really, because I think he received so much support in the replies to the statement that the club made, and I really hope that continues, because as you say, he's been struggling for a long time with a disease that Dean will have felt, unfortunately, like he's been losing his dad for some time now, and we hope that, although Dean wasn't too sure, that his dad recognised that he was the manager of this brilliant club, the club that he'd worked for and supported. I think it was quite poignant that they showed the '82 final the other day, because Absolutely. Dean and his dad were so involved in that. But yeah, no, kind of now bringing it on to a lighter note, it's good to see that, as I said, the players now feel that they have a responsibility to not just fight for the Premier League and the status of the club in this division, but also for Dean and his dad to give them and that family and indeed the club, really, some much needed positivity.
Absolutely. He'll certainly be looking down on Dean and be proud of everything he's achieved in his probably about just over 18 months with the club. So he'll certainly be proud of that. And I guess the football coming back will be a nicer, I guess it'll help him distract himself from it. He's got a job to do. As you say, the players are all up for it. And it's Sheffield United first, Dan. Now, we've got a very tough run of fixtures, very tough. Mm-hmm. And you look at how well Sheffield United have done this season. I believe they're 7th in the league at the moment. Yeah. And we went to Bramall Lane earlier in the season, did not look up to it whatsoever. I think Grealish hit the bar with a penalty or something like that. It was a poor display. Sheffield United, on the other hand, have been magnificent. It's going to be very tough to get our campaign underway. Dan, we've got 10 games left. This is the game in hand. It's so important we win this game, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. It's been really interesting to see in the Bundesliga and sort of analyse how is that actually the home team seems to struggle playing at home a lot of the time. It's usually the away side that it's funny how these things work out, but the away side, if you look at the results compared to home wins to away wins in the Bundesliga so far, the away side is usually favoured. But it's such an important game for us. We have to really be galvanised, and I think the players really understand the importance of this game, because as hard as it is, I mean, Sheffield United have been fantastic this season, but this is one of our more winnable games. You look at this, I think potentially the only game which you look at, which is more of a must-win, might be Crystal Palace at home. Yeah. You look at that one as one that we have to take 3 points from that game. But the games are going to start coming thick and fast. You know, we've still got to play Liverpool, still got to play Chelsea, Arsenal, Man United, Wolves as well are going to be a tough game. There's a lot of tough games to come, and so you know if you feel like we're going to stand any fighting chance of staying in this division, then this Sheffield United game, as good as they are, we have to really come back. And it's good to see that the players. I think Grealish was remarking the other day how impressed he's been with the sharpness and the intensity of training and how good the team looks. He said how good it is to have John McGinn out on the field next to them. And with these key players coming back, I think it's going to be too early for the likes of Wes and Heath. But John coming back is something which, you know, really can't be underestimated. And he could be a key figure in this game for sure.
Absolutely. Interestingly, you touched on the sort of the lack of home advantage in the Bundesliga. Upon doing a bit of research, and I'm sure you'll know this as well, being the avid Bundesliga fan you are, that throughout the first 2/3 of the Bundesliga season or something like that, roughly only 5 teams would win at home each match day. So interestingly enough, there wasn't that much of a home advantage, if you can call it that, in the Bundesliga. And I think we're seeing now only like Bayern Munich win at home pretty much in the Bundesliga. So there's a lot of people who've been obviously posing the same question as yourself. You know, are we going to struggle? We're near the end of the table, playing at home. You know, we've still got a lot of big teams to come, and I don't think it'll phase them as much. But it'll be interesting to see. I know Grealish said in his Sky Sports interview, you know, he's been used to playing in front of empty stadiums, as the academy and the development squad usually play a lot of games at Villa Park, as we've seen. And, you know, he was kind of stating the importance of trying to get the foreign lads ready and used to it. But I think, honestly, we're going to see the best of the likes of Douglas Luiz and Anwar El Ghazi in a situation where they've not got 38,000 Villa fans on their backs.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I posed this question to Ian because I think, especially for you know, the likes of I think Marvelous and Wes are perfect examples where they've been coming in from a league where there isn't, and you know, this is by no means to belittle the teams that they've come from, but obviously Villa Park is a massive venue. You're playing on a much bigger stage in a much bigger league for what we'd like to think is a bigger side, and I'm sure they'd be the first ones to tell you that. And I sort of felt that often walking out and having, because there is such a high demand to perform well at Villa Park. You know, you almost feel that when, you know, most of the times when you walk into a match day, this crowd expects to see a good performance, expects to see a result. You know, we like to think that teams can come to Villa Park and find it hard, but that reflects on our players as well, especially the newer ones. And perhaps with the weight off their shoulders, and, you know, when you're kind of recreating what is an almost training ground like atmosphere, the players like Douglas, who can come out of their shells a little bit more, and the likes of Marvelous too, who just perhaps might feel that weight lifted off them even slightly, and can really bring out some good performances. And so, yeah, the form has gone out the window for a lot of the sides in the Bundesliga, and you know, I don't want to keep referencing it because they're two very different leagues, but it's all we've got for comparison at the moment.
Yeah.
And you look at the likes of Schalke, who are in a very similar position to Sheffield United, are now, before the Bundesliga was restarted, who have yet to win a game.
Union Berlin as well.
Absolutely. And so it really, Köln as well, who have rocketed up the table, who were sort of between mid and the bottom half of the table. So it really just seems to vary a lot from team to team as to who comes back and who looks the best in training. And I think all we can look at the moment is the fact that our players seem to be impressed by just how well training has been going. And perhaps it's to do with some of the great haircuts that we've seen. I don't know. I saw Jez Thea he looks like Alison Becker, and hopefully he can perform like it too. It's been really good to see some of the Barnets. And yeah, Jack needs to lose that beard though, man.
I'm not a fan.
But the beard, I mean, I can understand having long hair. No one's got access to a barber, but surely that man's got access to a razor. it's put about 10 years on our Jack.
It really has. But you know what? And a lot of people were saying this when they were seeing the photos of the from the training ground and stuff. How much he resembles like a prime Bex.
Yeah,
in his
absolutely.
United days, and it's really good to see. And it's what's great about this as well is there's so often, and it's a thing in society now, and it's a thing with footballers. You see, they're the fittest people. They're wealthy. They have this lifestyle that everybody wishes they can have, and then you see Matt Target has to don a hairband. And Grealish has a scraggly beard, and it just makes you feel a bit better about yourself. Like,
absolutely,
they're humans too, especially seeing Sadio Mane's and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang's hairlines after this. I mean, the barbers are taking them from like a 6 to a 10, like as soon as this lockdown's over.
Absolutely.
So it's really nice to see the insight and just kind of see the players, at a more human level. It's good to see, but it's going to be a very tough game against Sheffield United. And I'm just going to spring this on you now, Dan. How do you think, or how would you want Villa to line up for this game?
Well, I think it's very interesting, really, because you'd like to think that if this period has given us anything, it's perhaps a chance to have a little bit of a rethink tactically. We know Dean Smith favours his 4-3-3. And I think it's fair to say, given the position we're in the league, that on the whole, we've tried the 5 or the 3 back, and on how you look at it, we've tried the 4-3-3, and it's fair to say, given we're on the league, neither have really worked consistently up to this point. We now have Samatta, who I'm excited to watch again. I think he's used to himself playing in a 2, and so with the likes of Keenan, I actually think there could be a really nice pairing there, because Keenan, I think his hold-up play is fantastic. I think the only attribute of his game which could perhaps be improved is just his goal-scoring abilities. And if you partner him with Samatta, who could potentially bear some of that goal-scoring responsibility and is the out-and-out poacher, the goal-scorer in that too, I think there actually could be quite a nice tandem there. But it'll be interesting to see how Dean likes it. But for me, I think you have to. I think it would be a lot for the players to introduce too much tactically that's new, given how kind of the match sharpness is going to be at a premium anyway. I think putting them back in a system which they're most familiar with and where you're going to induce the most comfortableness is probably the most sensible thing to do.
Yep.
But it's the midfield which I'm really interested to see how it works. And I think against Sheffield United, obviously John McGinn has to, he's sort of come back and is almost have to get the first name on the team sheet again, has to be. And I think it'd be really interesting to see who's put at the base of that midfield, and hopefully, it'd be interesting to see whether Jack's on the left. There's a lot to think about, isn't there? And it's quite hard to nail down a starting 11, and I'm sure Dean's got his work cut out in that regard.
Definitely, I think interesting you touched on the formation as well, because certainly against Leicester, and I got hammered for this in my preview for the Leicester game in the Premier League. We did play better with the back 3. We were more solid in the cup games, obviously, which saw us advance to the Carabao Cup final. So it'd be interesting to see if we match Sheffield United in that respect, because they're going to be playing their 3-5-2 or variant of that with their attacking centre backs, which is just crazy. So you're going to want that midfield packed. But again, as you say, you don't want to overcomplicate things. But saying that, they've had a lot of time off. They're going to have been thinking about this game for a while. I trust Dean to get it right. But as you said, again, it's going to be interesting to see if we're going to see Jack and John in the middle. Jack out on the wings. It could potentially see if we've got Jack in the middle, El Ghazi back on his favoured left-hand side, which is where I think he plays his better football, if I'm honest, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really a level playing field, mate. I feel like, apart from your key players like your Jacks, your Johns, your Tyrones, there's a real chance for anyone to stake a claim. I'm sure it's really varying player to player, how fit they are, how sharp they are. Again, to reference the Bundesliga, we've seen how much of a problem injuries have been. You're almost seeing a player lost to injury almost once every game. And so squad depth is important. We have more subs available to us as a team. And, you look at the likes of Holte and players like that who have sort of been frozen out a little bit, where they have a chance now to come back into a side where I'm sure they've all been keeping fit and to really prove themselves and to, as I said, make the most of this situation where there never has been so much uncertainty as to the starting 11, to really show Dean and the other coaches out on the training pitch that, I've been working hard during all this, I've put a bit of muscle on or whatever. We've all seen the transformations that players can undergo and have undergone during lockdown. The players in the Bundesliga have put on a lot of muscle. I referenced
Goretzka
in that photo of Leon Goretzka. And it's completely transformed his game. He looks like almost a completely different player to what he was beforehand. He's able to dominate the park a lot more. And I think for players like Holte, who looked just a little bit slow off the pace, perhaps a little bit too weak and didn't have the physical nature to get involved in a game, that players like him have a real opportunity now to sort of just show that they can be the guy to be the hero and keep us in the league. Because if this Villa side manages to keep itself up, then it will be some stalemate. But it's not impossible. I mean, I think if we win this game in hand, which although it's against tough opposition, it is always likely. We can rise up the table by a good 3 or 4 places, I think, ahead of the new match day. And what a way to get into the remaining 9 games that would be. And, if we can get a result here, especially at home, I think that would do the confidence no end, really.
Absolutely.
Into the final games.
As well, interesting you point out the Leon Goretzka transformation. It's not often players have the time to alter their body in a way like that. We saw it with Jack. He had a lengthy time out with an injury, which obviously allowed him to hit the gym, go on the weights while he was that injured. But there's never this time in between during a season where a whole squad and that's every player in the world in every league has the time to drastically change their muscle mass, their body fat percentage. They're little margins. You look at Leon Goretzka and think, God, he's strong, but it's shown how drastically it's changed his game. Because I wouldn't say he'd been certainly extraordinary in the first part of the season before it was cancelled, but now he looks like a completely different player. So it'd be interesting to see as well, especially for the kind of fringe players, maybe if you're seeing a Courtney Horse, an Emsbury Konsa hitting the gym, they've got a bit more muscle mass on them. Dean will probably end up favouring that potentially, and it can only be a good thing really for the players and the team.
Absolutely, and it will really, this period almost has a pre-season feel to it. In that Dean's been in the interviews that he's done a little while back now, he's been speaking to each member of the squad individually, doing video calls and going through highlights and bits of games, looking for things they did well, ways to improve on. And players need to have gone away and worked on that, in the limited capacities that they have been able to. And now gives a chance to come back after a really long period of review where, players have had to look at themselves in the mirror for a variety of reasons. And really come back as new players in a lot of ways and really focus on aspects of the games where they didn't work well on. And we all know that, Douglas Luiz is a perfect example of the quality that he has at such a young age, and where at times he hasn't really shown that this season. We all know him. It's probably why it's most frustrating with players like him, because he has such raw ability. I mean, he's captain Brazil at youth levels. He's led them out at the Toulon tournament, and he's got the ability. And so for him to go away and really fine tune his game, we could certainly see the best of players like him. And I think those kind of flair players who, I hate to be stereotypical just because he's Brazilian, but we all know the confidence and the trickery that he has. I mean, we've seen those photos of him nutmegging Marvelous out on the training pitch. And we know he is that player, but we've seen him sort of go inside a shell at points this season and sort of shy away from the pressure of the big games. And, when you look at, it works both ways. When you look at going to the likes of Anfield, you'd much rather do that without the cop in there and the pressure of having to walk out into that cauldron. So it will really work for both teams. And yeah, so it was 2 weeks yesterday, I think. I think it's the 17th we get underway.
Yeah.
6 p.m. I was doing a little bit of reading before we came online, and unfortunately, they don't think Villa TV will be able to be used for the remainder of the season. Because of the new rights that have been sort of agreed for the season. But it will be live on Sky Sports for the viewers that have access to that. I think there's also going to be 25 games of the league which are made free to air. And I think that's a great gesture. But also the one thing which I wanted to talk about is how much gratitude I have for the players for taking this risk and for putting themselves out there for the good of the public morale. I think it was Danny Rose who was saying that it's not players' responsibilities to do this, that, you know, they didn't sign a contract to be the guardians of the public's happiness. You know, almost all footballers will have children of their own or live with family, and so they're all taking such huge risks. And I'm really grateful to the players for doing this, because it's far from their responsibility, and it's not just the virus that they're risking themselves to, but as we've talked about, it's the risk of injury. You know, we've seen the likes of Zlatan. He's torn his Achilles tendon, and at the age of 38, I mean, that could be curtains for a guy. You know, he's a one hell of a player, and whilst it wouldn't surprise me if he did recover from that and came back to bang some goals in age of about 40. These players are risking a lot, and I think we really have to respect that, and it will do a lot to see football back on our screens, won't it, mate?
We do, and it'll be interesting to see as well. But you know, obviously, once we've played this game, we've had our game in hand, and a big. Obviously, apart from the corporate greed from the likes of Sky and BT, the big reason why this is, you know, the season is being played out. You know, the big argument in case from Villa certainly was, you can't relegate us when we have a game in hand, and we can still get out of this. It'll be interesting to see, because we're still having like 350 deaths daily from COVID-19. It'll be interesting to see in a few weeks' time whether more Premier League footballers get it, what the situation will be, because obviously by then people will probably be on more of a level playing field in terms of games played and stuff. Obviously a Tottenham player caught it as well. They didn't say who, but a Tottenham player had it the other day when they were doing their tests. So it'll be interesting to see in a few weeks what the landscape's looking like in terms of, from a selfish standpoint, where Villa are, but also how many, if there's been a rise in cases and deaths possibly as well, because you know, if there's been more deaths and you've seen you know, dozens of Premier League footballers get the coronavirus, it'll be interesting to see if the Premier League has the balls to be like, no, we're going to null and void it now, or just see what the general response is.
Yeah, for sure. I think it really has to be, and I think the TV schedule reflects a league that just wants to get this over and done as soon as possible to start, because obviously the longer that you draw this out, the more chance that you have of players contracting it, and just because of this sheer time scale. And so it's going to be an absolute football festival. You know, not just with the Premier League coming back, but we have the Bundesliga coming on. Serie A is starting to return to training. We have a return date for La Liga. So as fans, I mean, it's great, because
absolutely,
you know, these days of lockdown are going to become a whole lot more interesting. But for the players, it's a risk for sure. And you know, we've seen not in the Premier League, but in the Championship, you know, 3 Charlton players, Lyle Taylor, Chris Solly, and I've forgotten the name of the last one, unfortunately. But just saying that they're not, but especially Lyle Taylor. You know, he's their top goal scorer this season. I think their win percentage of that is something like 14% or something like that. And he's doing it for fear of not being injured. It's not actually the virus. He's out of contract in June. He's well within his rights to earn a move to a bigger club. And in order to facilitate that, he said that I'm not playing because I don't want to get injured and risk that dream move fading away. And so for all the Villa players to stand up for this, you know, we had a few players sort of flip-flop, and Troy Deeney and the likes weren't too sure. I think he's going to be partaking now. And that's what you want to see. Everyone in the league back out on the pitch. We want to get this done as safely, as fairly, and as quickly as possible in order to have the least risk. But no, it's interesting what you mentioned about this game in hand, because this has really been our saving grace in a lot of ways. You know, it's been our argument for not doing points per game, as Tyrone was talking about the other day with Sky.
Yep.
Purslow has been very vocal about it as well, the importance of not relegating us or taking any kind of action whilst teams still haven't played the same amount of games. And, you know, if we go out and lose this game 3 or 4-0, we're going to look like right mugs. And so it's on the players to protect the reputation of the club and go out and say, no, you were right to do this. We needed this game in hand. Even if we go and get a point or, you know, amazingly 3 points, it would really benefit the club, I think, if the players went out and put a performance in this one.
If they only turned up for that game, it'd be totally fine. Just get us out of it. That's all we want. But coming back on the issue of contracts expiring, it's been reported in the Birmingham Mail today, Birmingham Live, whatever you want to call it, that there seems to have been yet another stumbling block with Callum O'Hare. Now, this is a guy who is a Villa fan. He's been with Villa all of his life, Solihull born and bred, a very, very gifted player. And again, it's going to come down to for him wanting the guarantee of playing football, which, to be fair, I think if he and obviously we don't know which end the friction's from in terms of or the resistance is from in terms of the contract. He has a very good chance of playing first team football if Aston Villa get relegated. He's straight in that side, so obviously it's a risk as well. Villa could still well stay up. I don't want to write us off before we even kick the ball. Obviously, we are in the relegation zone. But it's an interesting situation, Dan, because this is a player who we've known about almost as much as Jack Grealish in terms of how he's sort of rise through the youth academy, the Hong Kong Sevens. A very good player to watch. Has a great season at Coventry as well, Dan.
Yeah, for sure, mate. And I don't really, as you said, I don't want to speak too much on what the club should or shouldn't be doing. You know, it could be the agent, could be Cal, could be the club, could be anyone, as you said, that's stopping this deal from getting over the line. But it's disappointing because he's, you know, if he goes on and has a career which he's more than capable of and plays at a good level, as you said, you know, if we got relegated, he could be a real asset to any side in the Championship. And obviously, we want him to be an asset to Aston Villa. And it's a shame that this is happening. But there's a lot of players that are being left in the lurch at the moment. I think it's a great shame that James Chester may never get the send off that he deserves. Obviously, sort of out on loan at the moment. His contract expires as well this summer. And you know, I can't imagine that that's going to be renewed. And so it's a real shame that we're not going to see. I really hope that we do see Cal put pen to paper, and because regardless of the club's future, regardless of his future, you know, even if he is to leave Aston Villa, for him to leave for free seems criminal. Yeah. You know, we saw Mark Albrighton talking on another Villa podcast the other day about how he would have signed any deal to stay at Villa. You know, whether it be first team, off the bench, whatever it was, he would have signed that deal because he's a Villa fan and wants to play for the club. And I'm sure Cal's the same, or I'd like to think so at least. And we've all gone to, you know, Mark is a player that every time I watch Leicester, I kick myself for the fact that you know, I watch him come on and think, God, how did we let that kid leave for free? And there are players, and we were speaking about this with Lewis, how many youth players we've just let go and have gone to have careers which you can't help but feel could have been useful in claret and blue. And you just don't want to see Cal added to that list, really, do you?
No, as well, as you say, from a business standpoint, even if, you know, Villa aren't going to persist on playing him, which I think is unlikely as well. I think even if you can get him to sign a contract, and even if we're in the Premier League, I think he's a player that would, first of all, benefit from being in and around the squad and being with Dean Smith. But as you can see, these loans to Carlisle and Cov have been so beneficial. They've been very late, but they've been very beneficial for his development. I think in 2 or 3 years' time, he would be very much in the squads in a Premier League team. But that's the difficult thing. He wants first team football now. I think that's fair to say. Obviously, we can't speak on his behalf, but as someone who's near 23, he should have been playing 3 years of first team football at this point. He should have 3 full seasons at whatever level under his belt. But from a business standpoint, surely it makes sense for Villa to be like, okay, here's a contract. We're going to set, depending on if we're in the Premier League, you'll go out on loan to a Championship club next season, and then you'll be a part of the squad. If we're in the Championship, you're the guy. You are the focal point of what this team is going to be around, because he's going to be at that level. He'll absolutely tear it up. I've got no doubts about that. And as you said, it's about retaining the assets. And even if you don't intend on using him, as long as you've got him signed down on a contract, you can flog him to someone for 5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it makes sense.
Absolutely, and I think, especially looking at it from sort of the dynamic of the squad, we don't have another 10. We have Jack, but we don't really have another player who's made for that role, and so you can't help but feel like even now, with us playing in the Premier League, he would be useful to have in the squad, just because we all saw what's happened when Jack hasn't played. In recent seasons in both the Premier League and the Championship, this side suffers because we just don't have a replacement. And those two are very similar in playing style. I think there are actually probably a number of ways where Cal potentially has a leg up on Jack, in that obviously he's nowhere near the player, but he seems to have a bit more pace.
Absolutely.
Jack is sort of glides on the ball, but Cal sort of zips about the final third, and he's he covers ground quicker than Jack does. Probably not as effectively just yet, but that's no detriment to Callum O'Hare. We just have an extremely gifted footballer in Jack Grealish.
A generational talent.
Absolutely, is the way to put it. And the similarities between those two players don't end there. And I can't help but feel like this period is going to be quite uncertain for the club as a whole. We've seen a lot of players that are coming out of contracts this summer. I think that Elmo is another player whose contract might be in contention. But we've seen a lot of transfer rumours during this period as well, mate. A lot of interest in Turkey, weirdly, for a couple of players. I saw
coming both ways as well. I mean, we've still been linked with Vida again.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a persistent one. We've seen Trez and Fenerbahce, who are quite keen. Obviously, Turkey's where we bought him from in the first place. It's clearly a league where he has put the best out of him, and I think it's a loan to buy for Trez. I think the interest would be intensified if we did get relegated. I mean, he's not a player that you can see playing in the Championship, but for Keenan Davis as well, Besiktas apparently are very keen. Their director of football is said, I think it's those words exactly, that their director is very keen, was the quote that was used on Keenan Davis. That's a bizarre one, isn't it, mate?
Who wouldn't be, though? I remember when Keenan Davis first burst on the scene. He probably only scored 3 goals in that Championship season, but he was very effective. And Bruce's arm was essentially forced into giving him a game. But Keenan Davis did what he had to do. And there was a lot of interest from Arsenal, Manchester City, Manchester United, Spurs. And it honestly doesn't surprise me. You know more than anyone, Dan. I'm a huge fan of Keenan Van Nistelrooy. He's my guy. He is going to be a very good footballer. I'm glad that we extended his contract, even though it was only by 12 months. Again, it's going to be a similar situation to Callum O'Hare. I think it will very much depend on what division we're in. But for me, Keenan's proved himself to be an effective number 9. Certainly in the Bournemouth game away. I know we didn't get anything from that game really, but him and Samata, that's a combination that just works, and that's a combination I can see. Obviously, I know Samagola is like 28 or 29, but that's a front two that I can see in the Premier League for the next 3 years easily without a problem. Keenan is an asset to this club, I think, and it'd be so stupid to let him go, especially to Turkey. I'm all for English players, going abroad to learn their trade. Not our English players, though. I want to see Keenan Davis play for Aston Villa.
Yeah, for sure, mate, for sure. There's you'd like to think that those two players, and I think it's why people are so excited, because it's that classic little and large combination that in a two works so well when you have the hold-up striker. And I think when we do eventually see Wes coming back into the fold again, he's a very similar player that I think will work really well with Samata, especially both having played in the same league. for so long. And yeah, Davis and Senegal is something that I certainly want to see more of. I think we need to be more flexible with our formations. I think that was probably a criticism of Smith and his management from this season, is that whilst we did eventually, I think that Burnley game was the first game where we went to the 3-back on New Year's, and we got one of the most impressive results that we've had this season. Although it was only 2-1, I think in the end, the first half sort of faded off in the second, but the first half is probably the best I've seen Villa play this season. I would argue, and it's something that you want to see more of. And Keenan, we would love for him to stay. Obviously, I think the problem comes again in just he's capable of playing first team football at a good level, and I think it'd be interesting to see him with being such a similar profile to Wesley. You feel like just because of how much we paid for Wesley and the sort of profile that he is, that when he's back fit, he becomes the chosen player out of those two. Just because when you buy a player, he's Villa's record signing, you have to play him. And so when Wes comes back into the fold, I'm sure Keenan will want reassurances that he's going to get the game time and he's going to play, because going out to Turkey is an interesting one. It's not particularly a high-profile league, but it's European football.
Absolutely.
The Besiktas are a club that flirt with the Champions League, and no matter who you are, that's an exciting proposition. And you know what? When you're playing the Premier League and we have such a profile, this interest is going to become increasingly more common. But yeah, you want to give promises to players like that. And again, I'm going to reference what our chat with Liam is, that we do need to have more faith in our academy.
We don't want to get it wrong again.
Oh, goodness gracious. With Lewis. Because we need to have faith in these guys, because they can do it, and we let them go, and we can't just sign them onto contracts and expect them to be competent with on the bench. These guys have got to play games.
That's the thing as well, and it's I look at the strategy with the transfers, and it's something that Gary Thompson mentioned on the podcast as well. There's players you pick up for a low fee, and every so often they set the world on fire and you move them on. Whilst Wesley's our record signing, we didn't, in the grand scheme of things, spend that much money on him. If Wesley has one or two good seasons, nets 15 goals a piece, you can easily see Wesley being moved on. There's money to be made there. And of course, there's money to be made on the likes of Keenan Davis as well. But for me, I think it makes... I want to liken Keenan Davis to Agbonlahor in the fact that, we had Angel, we had Carew, we had Heskey, but we always had Gabby. Mm-hmm. And I think Keenan has a very important role to play in the future at this club, or at least I hope he does. And that strikers that are brought in, obviously to score goals and be successful for the team, but also you can sell them on, and that allows you to develop the squad in other areas, and it also keeping it does no harm in signing West for 25 million and then suddenly selling him for 75 and keeping Keenan Davis, because Keenan Davis can do what Wesley can do.
Yep. For sure. And this was very much our transfer strategy, wasn't it? It's that young players with high potential, with greater resale values. I mean, Douglas Luiz, with all credit that's due, is not signing for Villa to play for them for the next 10 years. Douglas Luiz is using Villa as a stepping stone. You only have to look at the fact that Man City put that buyback clause on him to suggest that they still very much have aspirations and they still believe he has a future potentially there. And Douglas, it's going to be, I think this season it has proved how hard it is going to be for Villa to establish ourselves in the Premier League. And Douglas and both obviously Wes have now been called up to the full Brazil squad for the first time.
It's mental, isn't it? It's mental.
It's great, and that's what you want to see, isn't it? And I was so happy for both of those boys when that was announced, especially for Douglas, because as I was saying earlier, he's represented Brazil and captained them. I think he is still the captain of their under-23 side, which, when you consider the talent that Brazil brings through, and the players that they will have in that under 23 side tells you all you need to know about the quality of our own Douglas Luiz. As I said, it is Villa will be a club for him to get the game time he needs. But yeah, for Keenan especially, you want to see him in and around the squad because we know there's a player there. Again, he's a player who needs to be nurtured, and there are elements of his game which he needs to improve upon. But the hold-up play and how physical he is and how strong he is and how well he's able to shift the ball for hold-up strikers, not particularly. I mean, that's probably been the criticism of Wesley at points this season, is that he doesn't look particularly natural in his hold-up play, whereas Keenan does. He certainly has the one up on Wesley in that regard, and Wesley is a £25 million striker. And so I'm sure he will be aware of that. He'll be aware of the faith that's put in him, because after Samagol, you're looking to Keenan as your second choice striker. And so, I put him into that band of players like I was talking about earlier with the likes of Holte, who are players who have sort of been in and out on the fringes, haven't really established themselves to say, look, Gaffer, I've come back raring to go, I'm in shape. We've seen the video that Hotte shared on his Instagram of him sticking on top bins. JT was certainly impressed by that. And so we want to see more of that, and we want to see players like this come to the fore. And the last sort of transfer that I wanted to touch on, mate, is again, for why I feel like almost incredible at this point, is another loan for the Axe. I've seen it. It's crazy. We should just buy that lad at this point, surely.
You think so? But I think the thing with him is, I have no doubt in my mind that Axel Tuanzebe is going to be a very good, even England international. I think he has that potential. He really does. He's a class act. He's just made of glass, and that's. I think on that you can probably get him at a reduced price, but with I think that the talks kind of come, not that Villa are interested, but that United are interested in Koulibaly, which obviously pushes Axel even further down the rank. And I think honestly he's had this time to make sure he can nurse his injury. I'm sure. I'm not up to date with my Manchester United squad fitness levels, but I'm sure he's got to have be nearing sort of fitness now with the amount of time he's had off. And I honestly think, I mean, we bought Mings for 26 million, and everyone said we were overpaying. Yet Harry Maguire was bought for 70 million, and Lewis Dunk was nearly bought for 40 million or whatever in that weird chain of transfers. I think you can pay 20 million for Axel Tuanzebe from Manchester United, and I would definitely say that is good value in this market.
Well, absolutely, mate. It's in recent years the best centre-back partnership I've seen for Villa was Mings and Axe. I think just how
3 games only.
Yeah, it was good in the sense that what I like about those two players is their versatility and the fact that they have spent so much of their Axe has been played at right back, mainly under Steve Bruce. But Axe was put in a right back. Axe has played DM for United in the youth ranks, and and playing in those positions makes both Mings and Axel so comfortable on the ball, and you feel so reassured when you have two centre backs like that. And you look at Engels, who isn't as mobile, perhaps isn't as comfortable on the ball as an out-and-out traditional centre-back. Engels has proved himself this season. But, in terms of technical ability, Axel definitely has the edge. I mean, I know we've only seen him in the Championship, but if I was Axel, I know, as you said, he struggled with fitness, but I can't help but feel like I'd be a little bit aggrieved because Ole made him promises last summer. Obviously there was a lot of interest when we came up, and obviously we wanted to keep as much of the core as we could from the side that went up from the Championship. And I'm sure we would have sniffed at Tammy and the same at Axel, but Ollie said no. Axel's got a future here. He's going to get the game time. He recognised how much of a talent he was, but we just haven't seen that, mate. He's sort of filled in the cup, and he's played in the Europa League at times this season as well. And whilst it's been a topsy-turvy season for Man United, to say the least, their defence has looked pretty good. I think they've conceded less goals than they had this time last season, and with Eric Bailly coming back into the fold, Lindelof has looked good this season. I thought obviously Harry Maguire is now your captain and a staple in that side. Unfortunately for Ty, for Axel, especially with the likes of Rojo on loan, he's going to be coming back as well. I just don't see a way in for him, and I think for the better of his career, and if he is going to go on and play for England at those levels, which I completely agree he's capable of, he's got to look elsewhere. And we see that video of him singing back to the Holte and joining in with the chants. I think that was after the Blues game, maybe.
Yeah, Blues at home.
And we know he feels at home here, and even if it is another loan, at this point, you kind of feel like for Axel, would it be the fourth loan to us?
Fourth, I think.
Fourth,
yeah,
which is
he was on loan for 3 seasons, which is hard to believe because he got injured so many times. But no, I completely agree. He's so talented, and I think that one of the most important and underrated things that often isn't considered in a lot of failed transfers is how at home a player feels. So you're instantly ticking the box there. He's back. He knows Jack. He knows Ty. He knows most of the squad. He knows the manager. He knows the club. He knows the area. For him, in terms of developing his career, it seems like the most sensible thing to do, to be honest. And again, as you said, with that variety of positions he can play, I could easily see him playing the DM role in games for Villa, like easily. He's so talented, and I would love to see him at the back with Mings. It's such a classy partnership. No, it's been interesting hearing about transfers in this time, Dan, because obviously with everything that's gone on about not so much from Villa but from other clubs, kind of saying, look, we need this TV money. We want the games to play because we need this TV money. It's going to be interesting to see. I think there's the market will take a bit of a hit because I think certain clubs won't be able to spend as much. Obviously, that's not the case for United, but if they're going out and spending as much as Ole says they're going to, they're going to have to balance the books somewhere. So I think a deal could potentially be found.
Yeah, for sure, mate. And I think the transfer window is something that's yet to be sorted out. I think I've seen teams wanted it to run through until October. They want a sort of July to October period because I think the deals are going to take a lot longer. B, you need the borders to fully open and everything like that. I mean, obviously, a lot of the world is still closed off, and you can't travel in and out for obviously the virus and everything like that. But I don't think we'll see too many high-profile cases. I think it's pretty much guaranteed now that we'll see the likes of Jadon Sancho staying at Borussia Dortmund, just because I don't think sides have got the money to be investing on that kind of players, and with no real clarification yet on when leagues are going to restart. And I'm not talking about this season, I mean next season, when that's all going to take place. I think the transfer window is really going to be scaled down. And so for players like Axel, we have seen some deals happen, especially loan ones of high profiles. There will be ones like Icardi is a good example. Who's made his loan to PSG permanent. So it can happen, and the big deals will happen. And Axel will be, unfortunately, because he plays for Manchester United, because he's English, his price will be slightly inflated. But he ticks all of the club's profiles. And it's actually interesting that you raised the point that you'd like to see him in DM. I actually think you could make a case for he is perhaps the exact kind of profile that we've been lacking in that position. As perhaps the criticism of Nakamba and Luiz have been at points of the season that they haven't just got the weight, the muscle, the physicality to play that kind of position and really anchor that midfield. And whilst they've probably got a bit more mobility than Axel, he certainly has that. And so in that regard, there are a number of reasons why this deal would make sense.
Absolutely. I think one more deal that we should potentially talk about before we round it up, it's kind of gone a bit quieter now. The likes of Liverpool were interested. Milot Rashida of Werder Bremen, I believe.
Yeah.
Kosovonian international. There's been a huge price tag slapped on him. He's a player who I've seen a fair bit of throughout the course of the season. I've seen before, and I think he would be a fantastic addition, but it's at some price, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, there's a lot of interest in this boy, mainly because of the position that Werder Bremen are in the Bundesliga. It's looking like they could get relegated, but this guy's been absolutely stellar. He's averaging more than a goal involvement every other game for Werder Bremen. He's only 23. He's been the first name on the team sheet for Werder Bremen for a lot of this season. I think it's like 83% of the games he's started for them just in the Bundesliga. I think he's got like 7 goals, 5 assists in a really struggling side. I mean, Werder Bremen are some side off the pace, but he's been a shining light in that side. Can play off the left, can play as a striker, can play just off the 9 and the 10. There are a whole host of clubs interested in him at the top and bottom of the Premier League. You know, as you said, I've also seen Wolves, Palace, West Ham. So we've got some real competition for this boy. But it's interesting that we are looking to sign someone that can play off that left-hand side, because it shows our intentions to bring Jack in through the middle. And yeah, he would be a fantastic addition to this side. I was only watching him, some highlights of him the other day when they played Schalke. And he picks up an assist in that game for Leonardo Bittencourt. And I was really impressed by what I saw. And you can't help but feel like he's the exact kind of player that would thrive in this league, and he fits our transfer profile. He's only 23, big future ahead of the lad. And yeah, that's one to get really excited by.
It's the fee. I think that will be the only stumbling block in that one, but it'd be good to see. I think that's probably a good place to round up, Dan, unless you've got any final thoughts or words you'd like to share.
I don't think so. I think just again, I think check out the pods that we've done with our 3 guests. They've been fantastic, really enjoyable to do. Hopefully, we've got some more. So we're working on a couple, got a couple in the pipeline. So it'd be interesting to see if we could sort a few more out for you guys. But just overall to everyone, we're getting there. We're getting through it. The football's almost back. Shops are reopening soon. I think the barbers, 4th of July. Forget the football. Forget the shops opening. The barbers. That's
what we need, man.
I've got that one penciled in the diary, mate.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we just keep the chims up. We're getting there, everyone. Stay safe, and I'm sure you and I will keep the content coming.
Absolutely, mate. And again, as we kind of touched on at the start of the podcast, there will be links in the description to petitions that you can sign, and just some general information about the Black Lives Matter movement. So if you've already not checked that out, or you're not educated, I implore you to do so. It's very important. So yeah, if you enjoyed this podcast and you're listening on YouTube, hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Comment your thoughts below as well. The comments, we really do appreciate your comments, good or bad. We like engaging with you guys. If you're listening on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe and like. I'm not sure what you do on them really. But yeah, just to support the podcast, support the channel as much as possible. We really would appreciate that. So yeah, up the Villa.